Good morning. Thanks for coming out to the panel. As she said, I'm Stewart Varner. I'm the Digital Scholarship Librarian at UNC. Sarah Potvin, Digital Scholarship Librarian at Texas A&M, and Zach Coble, Digital Scholarship Specialist at NYU. This panel was put together mostly over email, so we met up last night to make sure we were all on the same page, and actually wound up writing a couple of new pages, I guess. So. Have a couple of corrections to make to the things you might have read in your program. I'll be speaking first, and I'm not going to be talking about the DocSouth data project. If that's what you came for, corner me afterwards and I'll tell you all about it. But I think we've got something a little bit better worked out. So to help me calibrate a couple of things, how many of you work in libraries? Okay, so that's all of you. Okay, so that'll help me do this, I think. So the reason I ran through all of our job titles a minute ago is we all have really similar job titles. And the details of what we do from institution to institution kind of vary day to day and in detail. But the fact that we exist and that we have counterparts at many universities all over the country points toward a question that lots of research libraries are asking themselves, and the question is something like, how do we keep digital scholarship from killing us? So I'm going to sidestep the question of what is digital scholarship for just a second, because that's a rabbit hole that could probably be a whole other thing. But what I would like to say is that I would like to simply point out that however you define digital scholarship, there's a really good chance that libraries have been active partners in defining it and building it and evolving it for as long as most people can remember. Digital scholarship is really not a new question for libraries, but it is a question that keeps evolving on us. So I struggled with the right visual analogy, and I'm still not sure I'm hitting the right note with this one. I'm probably just getting kind of nostalgic for summer tomatoes. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to make is that what it means for a library to be a partner in digital scholarship has really changed over time, and hopefully that's ripening and not about to rot. So I want to kind of illustrate what I mean by this by telling you a personal story about myself. So in 2003, which now kind of feels like a long time ago, I was a grad student at Emory. I joined a team based in the library to work on an archival project like the one that Ryan was just, or the ones that Ryan was just talking about. I was working with an English professor who was already several years into a multi-year NEH grant to digitize genre fiction novels written by women and put them online. There were dozens of similar projects like this going on, and many more popped up since then. And it's probably worth noting some of the characteristics of these projects. These projects were ambitious in scale and in their use of technology, particularly for the time. They were often experimental, and that no one knew exactly how to do this, but that figuring that out was often one of the goals. The people who were working on these projects were often assumed to be wasting their time because this stuff was a fad and it wasn't going to count for T&P. And now many of those projects have become sources of deep anxiety for the libraries that help build them as we struggle to figure out how to maintain them after all these years. So with all of that as a backdrop, I started this job at UNC in February. In some ways, I feel like it's a next generation digital scholarship job. The work isn't project-based anymore. It's really process-based. And we're trying to figure out what we can learn from all these experimental projects that we've done in the past in order to create reusable and repeatable tools and workflows. So to quote many of the job ads I've seen over the past couple of years, we're trying to create scalable and sustainable solutions to digital scholarship. So I think I probably owe my job to a strategic planning document, which is ironic as I am allergic to things like strategic planning documents and words like that. But nevertheless, the plan adopted by UNC libraries took a step back from its close focus on building library collections and stated that what we really need to do is to be engaged with the entire life cycle, the entire research life cycle, from inspiration to preservation. So this meant creating paths through the different library resources. Previously, people would go to any number of places in the library or on campus to start a project. What we really wanted to do was just build a front door and say, enter here, that this is where it starts. To facilitate that, the library created a new division called Digital Research Services, which is made up of our GIS librarians and the Data Services librarian, and also the Digital Library Specialist, as well as a small army of graduate students who staff a desk for us. There's not much that's actually new in this division, but it did bring together existing and complementary library resources in 3 virtually and philosophically linked spaces around campus. So the Research Hub and the Health Sciences Library is really focused on video conferencing. The Research Hub and our Science Library is a maker space. And it has everything in it from like Play-Doh and popsicle sticks up to 3D printers. And then the Davis Library, where I spend most of my time, built a research hub. And they carved out a lot of flexible workspace for students and room for presentations, not entirely unlike this space. And they also added a few desktop machines with real specialized software. The big thing you see here, it's called a liquid galaxy. It's a visualization wall. It's a small wall or a really big screen, depending on how you think of it. And it's really designed to, it's optimized to work with Google Earth. Online mapping is a really big part of what we do at UNC, so students are really getting a lot out of this, and we've been able to upload historical maps into it, so it's been pretty fun. Let's see. So having the Research Hub has really been great. It really has worked as this front door, and centralizing some of those tools into the Research Hub has also been pretty useful, if for no other reason, because it gave us the chance to reevaluate what's available in the library. But I would argue that the most valuable thing about the new research, or the new Digital Research Services division, and the Research Hub itself has been this conversation that's opened up, the conversation that we've been able to open up with campus about what a library actually is and about what a librarian does. It's given us so many opportunities to reach out to faculty about what they need and to bring students into the space for new reasons. It's also given us the opportunity to reintroduce ourselves to the university administration, who frankly have had a lot on their minds lately. So this picture is actually the provost talking to the university librarian and the GIS librarian about what's going on in this new space. And at a really big state school, that's a really unique opportunity to get that kind of conversation to happen. So I want to wrap things up and suggest that as we move from library collections, as we move from library collaboration and digital scholarship being defined by these large projects to being defined by just a more general acceptance of technology on campus, we really have a chance to engage our faculty and students in new ways. And I want to pass it off to Sarah and then to Zach, who will go a little bit deeper into what happens when we actually make that engagement happen.
So now that we have projects that are going on in the library, what do we do about those? How can we create infrastructure around that is the question that we've been asking at NYU for a while. So I, as Stewart mentioned, am the Digital Scholarship Specialist at NYU. I've been working there for about a year now, and so what we are trying to do there is, with my hire, kind of came the formation of our Digital Scholarship Services unit. So there are 4 of us in this unit, and I'm the one full-time person. So there are 3 others who have duties elsewhere and kind of spend other time with us. And so it's co-run by Jennifer Vinnipal and Monica McCormick. Both of them are my bosses and have been working in digital publishing and digital libraries and that sort of stuff for, you know, for a long time now. So they know what they're doing, and what they have done is, before I came on board, was to do a lot of work to get it set up that we, you know, have the infrastructure in place of knowing what we're going to be doing so that we can be successful. So they have done a lot of research into gap analysis in terms of, you know, technology, services, tools, all those sorts of offering university-wide. So going to scholars and asking them, you know, what are you doing? What would you like to be doing? You know, what's the current, you know, climate on campus here? So doing that sort of environmental scanning, and in addition to that, figuring out what the needs are locally, doing a lot of research as well at the, you know, kind of the macro level. So talking to Stewart when he was at Emory and a lot of the other DH centers, kind of that half dozen that, you know, always get mentioned, figuring out what those people are doing, what kind of services are they offering. So as a product of that research, they came up with this 4-tiered model for digital scholarship services. And this is kind of, they published this last year in the Journal of Library Administration. There was a special issue on digital humanities. And so basically what this was kind of like at a moment where there was enough of a critical mass of different organizations and institutions that were offering these sorts of services that they could kind of say, all right, there are kind of 4 basic levels of services that are being offered. And you know, kind of, in a sense, manifested this model for how we wanted to be doing things at NYU. We weren't quite at that point where we were ready to get going with it, but now, you know, we have been for the past year. So it's basically, at the lowest level, you know, kind of the basic enterprise services, so email, wikis, blogs, that sort of stuff. And then above that, you have your institutional repository and kind of getting into a little bit more things that are in the library's territory. And then on top of that, you start getting into the really serious customized work, and, you know, where you need grants and programmers and large, you know, teams to be working on these sorts of things. So obviously, as in your food pyramid, like, you know, these are your sweets up here. You only want to have like 1 or 2 of these going on at the same time. Otherwise, you get into projects and things like Stewart had mentioned earlier, where you just kind of doing this year in and year out, and you realize that you're locked into, you know, some legacy project, and you're having to commit staff and technology resources to something that has kind of been played out and you don't really want to be doing. And that was a problem that we had confronted at NYU. Our digital library team was kind of, you know, locked into a handful of these projects that they had to, you know, they were now given the keys to, and it's like, you are the ones responsible for this. And, you know, it wasn't necessarily established at the outset who would be looking after this in the long term, and, you know, wasn't necessarily thought out. And now they were the ones doing that. And couldn't really take on new or interesting projects because, you know, they were so bogged down with keeping these other ones up. So, you know, they had made a commitment to, you know, only taking on new projects if this is something that can scale up. We're not going to do some sort of one-off project where we're committing our programmers' time to doing something that's only going to be useful for this one scholar. You know, we have to be able to do something where we can, you know, scale this out and have it be available for other people as well. So one of the ideas embedded in this 4-tiered model is that you start out, you know, with the fancy up top at level 4 or level 3 where you're introducing new services, but once those kind of become, you go through the pilot and you do that one time, figure out if this is a service that you want to offer again, and if it is, then it comes down into level 2 where you're able to, you know, offer that on a wider scale. So an example of that is what we're doing right now with Omeka. So we'll be doing a pilot in the spring to kind of figure out the technical logistics of, you know, what we can support, what we can't support, but the idea is that we would like to offer an enterprise level Omeka service. So we have a lot of people coming in, you know, wanting to do the basic exhibits or whatever, and, you know, a lot of times we have to say, well, you know, you can go over here to get the web hosting and do it yourself, or you can do the omeka.net, but we can't really help you with that. And so we've had enough requests coming in for that we kind of realized that, this is something that the library should be providing. Similar to that as well is a WordPress service. So that's something that, our IT department is now offering. And so people can have that, like basic website. It's one of those kind of eternal problems in academia of just like this basic website. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard of a service to offer, but somehow it just is. So we have, ideally, soon we'll have a WordPress and an Omeka service, and that will really kind of answer about, I'd say, 2/3 of the digital scholarship requests for services that we have coming in the door. Most of those can be solved with either WordPress or Omeka. We also offer, I guess kind of at the level 3, our research sites, which is a little bit more of a customized WordPress. So if you have, want to be doing something with WordPress that you can't do with the basic, kind of out of the box IT version of WordPress sites, we can help you with that. So an example of a project where we're doing that is with a graduate student who's scanned some of the materials from our special collections and wants to just throw a few of those online, not even enough that really needs an Omeka site. So we're going to use WordPress, but needs to have some way to embed those images from our that are being stored on our special collections server, rather than upload all of those into the WordPress site, wanting to be able to just reference those on the special collections server. So there's a particular WordPress plugin that we needed to install, couldn't have that on our IT WordPress site, so we were able to install that for them on our own version and get that set up. So that's kind of one of the things that we were looking at long term of, this scholar has, maybe 50 to 100 pictures that he could upload them himself, but kind of looking at, well, what about the next scholar who wants to do this as well? And we don't want them to have to manually upload all of these, images. Is there some way that we can automate that? So kind of looking, down the line at these long-term things. And so that's kind of where the sustainable thing comes in. So the sustainable and the scalable are two big themes that we've been trying to do at NYU when we look at taking on a new project. So a lot of that comes down to being extremely skeptical when somebody comes in the door wanting to do one of these tier 4 projects. You have a lot of that coming in. A lot of my day-to-day work involves consultations. So, anybody can come in who has an idea for a project or, wants some help figuring out how to do it. And, kind of everybody comes in wanting that, tier 4 project. Oh, I saw, this one thing and, it looked really great. And because somebody else has done it and like, I can now do that, like no problem at all. So some of that expectations management, but, there are people who have, pretty well thought out things, projects that they want to get going with, and being able to sit down with them and kind of walk through all the different steps and understanding what the library can offer and what we can't offer is been really helpful for helping us decide when to say no and when to say yes, understanding what we're committing ourselves to and what that's going to look like long term and short term, and what's that going to require in terms of staffing, in terms of technology, now and down the road. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we've been up to for the past few years. So I guess we can open it up now for Q&A.
We accept questions and answers.
Well, Zach, you actually hit on something that's really important in trying to support a lot of these projects. And I think everything you said is right, but I know a lot of the times in the projects that we're talking to faculty about, WordPress or Omeka are not going to serve their needs. And so kind of two questions. One is, have you had to have a conversation with a faculty member to sort of adjust how they wanted to do the research to be able to fit one of your platforms so that it could be supported? And how do you have that conversation? And do you see any other platforms coming that can serve that purpose, to where you can be serving it, maybe a more dynamic platform that you can be supporting these projects, but still allow a little bit more, allow it to be a little bit more dynamic than what WordPress or Omeka allows?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I guess to answer your last one first, collective access, I believe, is a platform. I guess I've heard it described as like the Drupal of exhibits. I was reading some site about that the other day. So it's kind of like a little bit more, you can do a little bit more extensible than Omeka. So I know we have a faculty member who's working with the collective access people to, I think that's the name of it, I could be butchering it, to kind of see what is, what you can even do with that. So I don't have, I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that, but that's one thing that could possibly offer a little bit more options of what to do. And in terms of people coming in, so a lot of times that, you know, as I mentioned, like we kind of know our strengths and what we can do in the library. So I didn't get a chance to mention that we also work really closely. I mentioned our digital library team. We also have in the library a data services team, and then that, as you might imagine, do the kind of quantitative, qualitative, GIS stuff, and then also we call it the digital studio, so doing kind of the AV stuff, any sort of scanning and audiovisual and all that. So we are all like closely partnered, and most of us usually have kind of dual roles with these other units. So we kind of know what we can and cannot do. So if somebody, you know, comes in, we're able to kind of like pipe them over to the right place. And if it's something that we can't do, you know, we're comfortable with saying, you know, we can't do this. And we're able to, you know, refer them to other tools or technologies that they can use, but realizing that, you know, if this is something that's central to your project and this is like, you know, a particular path you want to go down, sorry, you know, we can't help you, but, you know, here's some places that you can go, and like sometimes that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to like do all the things for all the people.
If I can add a little bit to that. Okay, it's on now. So I've often found myself in that situation where I have to say no to someone, and I'm totally comfortable saying no, but I try to make it clear that it's not the library putting restrictions on the kinds of work they can do. It is budgeting or staff that's putting a restriction on this, and so and try to turn that around. So, you know, if this is something that the university needs to be working on, then we need to work together to advocate for more resources in the library. But it's not me just saying no because I don't like your project.
Hi, so you're actually making me remember the first time I went to talk about a project idea with Bethany Novisky, and she employed what she called the wet blanket of administrative love, which is a great term. So my question is for all of you, because, and it's related to the last question, and it's about this sort of simultaneous need to develop platforms that are sort of widely usable, supportable with a given staff, and also the desire for certain, probably particular faculty members to have spaces for experimentation. And in particular, I'm thinking, you know, about the many, many frustrating conversations I've had where I just want a server that I can actually edit, right? And I want someone to say, we recognize that you are capable of doing this and we will allow you to do this. And what's ended up happening is I've just bought my own server space that I use for all of my classes. And that's the space where we can try out the new application that just came out and maybe will fail and be terrible, or that maybe will be interesting and worthwhile. And so I wonder if you've sort of thought about having sandboxes for faculty who need or want, and I'm particularly thinking about the classroom, not necessarily the big research project, but they're like, I want to try out this thing. I don't want you to commit to supporting it for the entire university, but I want somewhere to try it out, and how you've sort of managed that.
So I have one example, a fairly recent example of dealing with something like that. And so I work really closely with something on our campus called the Digital Innovation Lab, which is also a digital humanities office based in the American Studies Department. And so a lot of what we do is like try to avoid stepping on each other's toes. And this is a real big concern for the kinds of projects that they're working on. And we kind of joke about how, you know, sometimes the faculty have a hard time thinking about time beyond their grant period. but that librarians have a hard time thinking about time frames shorter than 50 years. And so we, trying to figure out, how can we meet in the middle? And depending on your own campus culture, this may sound totally absurd. It's actually working out pretty well at UNC. Our central IT actually has a service that they call project space, and it is kind of a temporary, you can have some space for a semester or for a year, and they are pretty clear about, this is temporary, this, and you take care of it.
Yeah.
But our central IT has actually decided they're comfortable with that, as far as I can tell. Another model that I've seen work that was library-based had to do with the library obtaining some Amazon server space that was just completely off of anything that made them nervous, and you could burn it down, blow it up, it didn't matter. It wasn't connected to anyone's student information. So the library became more okay with offering that kind of service. The financial cost wasn't huge for the Amazon service, except you have to pay someone who knows what they're doing in that space, because it's a little bit different from traditional server administration. It's not completely different, but you need staff to do that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I know, like at a previous job I was at, I was able to convince the library director to give me the Amazon web space, and so it's just one of those that, if you came to ask me, we could spin up whatever. But I think a lot of it is just kind of like having one person who's able to get that little budget line to have, because if you want server space for a year, it's $50, $60. Like, it's not that much, but getting the administrative sign off on that, it's easier to go outside. I've gone through the hurdles of trying to do that within the institution, and you're getting on servers with student data and that sort of stuff. So if you get somebody to give you the budget line to go wherever and do that, that's probably the easiest way. But I think, a really important thing that you mentioned is that timeline limit that's on it for 1 year. So you're not locked into it indefinitely, that you're able to say, yes, this is going to be $50 for this 1 year, and that's it. Again, getting into that, as we were kind of talking about that sustainable thing that people kind of bristle when you're like, oh, I get this great thing, digital, it's gonna sparkle, and I think there's getting some backlash against that and that's a lot of my job, is it's when somebody comes in and says they want server space, is okay, what does that mean? This could go 50 different directions, and each one is going to have a different answer. So it's kind of getting that figured out what it is, and then going from there.
Hi, I'm Josh Boyer from North Carolina State, and I just had a quick comment regarding, I like your level 4 projects, that resonates with me. Something that I have experienced in what I now think is a funny way is a tension between what library administration and faculty think of those level 4 projects, and each side thinks the other should pony up money or other resources. So in other words, administration, which I'm a part of, so I should be clear on that, thinks that faculty should, especially if they have grants, they should work with us, ask us for help, and then, oh, look, you've got grant money, maybe the library could get a piece of that. And then faculty think, you're lucky to be working with me, and so no, I'm not going to give you any of my grant money. Also, do you have money? And so anyway, I find it, when I'm in a good mood, I find it entertaining to be caught between these two forces that both think the other should be extremely lucky to work with